The streets of Konoha bustled with life as vendors called out their wares and children darted between market stalls, their laughter echoing in the warm sunlight. But Naruto Uzumaki, now imbued with the memories and intellect of Mayuri Kurotsuki, wasn't part of the cacophony. He sat in the shadows of a crumbling wall, his wide blue eyes scanning the crowd with an intensity far beyond his years. To the untrained eye, he appeared like any other lonely orphan, his oversized orange jacket too bright against the muted tones of the village. But inside his mind, a symphony of analysis played, his thoughts weaving intricate patterns of logic and deduction. Fascinating, he mused silently, watching a shinobi reprimand a merchant for selling counterfeit weapons. The shinobi's posture, his over-reliance on intimidation, these were catalogued, dissected, and filed away for future use. Konoha's power structure was a puzzle, and Naruto Mayuri had every intention of mastering it. Naruto's life on the surface remained unremarkable. The villagers dismissed him as a nuisance, a brat too naive to understand the scorn hurled his way. It was an illusion he fostered with care. By day, he played the fool, clumsily chasing after stray cats or falling flat on his face during academy sparring sessions. By night, his tiny apartment became a laboratory. Scraps of metal and wood scavenged from training grounds were meticulously cleaned and arranged on the floor, alongside scrolls pilfered from forgotten corners of the library. The first time he infused chakra into a seal he'd painstakingly drawn on a broken kunai, the resulting spark nearly took off his eyebrows. But rather than curse his failure, Naruto smiled a chilling, self-satisfied grin that didn't belong on a child's face. "This energy," he muttered, turning the kunai in his hands. "Primitive, yet full of potential." The villagers wielded without understanding its true nature. How disappointing. But for me. His grin widened. It's a beginning. Weeks turned into months as Naruto refined his craft. The crude puppets he created from discarded ninja tools were far from elegant, but they served their purpose. One such puppet, a spindly creation made of scrap wood and jagged kunai tips, crawled across the floor like a mechanical spider. He watched it with a critical eye, noting the strain on the chakra threads connecting it to his fingers. With a flick of his wrist, the spider lunged at a piece of cloth pinned to the wall, slicing through it with remarkable precision before collapsing into a heap of broken parts. "Acceptable for now," Naruto muttered, his voice devoid of emotion. He glanced at the pile of failures that littered his apartment, the discarded prototypes that had fallen short of his exacting standards. They were a testament to his relentless pursuit of perfection. Naruto's observations of Konoha's inhabitants grew more methodical. He categorized them not by rank or reputation but by utility. The baker who left his stall unattended for precisely 10 minutes each morning became a reliable source of bread. The retired shinobi with a penchant for drunken ramblings revealed tales of forgotten training grounds hidden in the forest. It was during one such venture into the forest that Naruto discovered a rusted weapons cache. The blades were brittle, the seals faded, but to him, they were treasures. He spent hours dismantling them, studying the seals and mechanisms with the fervor of a true scientist. "These fools discard such potential," he muttered, carefully etching a modified seal onto a shard of steel. When he infused it with chakra, the shard hummed with latent energy. That night, Naruto unleashed his latest creation, a puppet crafted entirely from the steel shards. It moved with a fluidity that far surpassed his earlier attempts, its blade limbs gleaming in the moonlight. At the academy, Naruto maintained his facade of incompetence. He deliberately failed basic ninjutsu exercises, his clones flickering out of existence almost as soon as they appeared. "You're hopeless, Naruto," Iruka-sensei would sigh, shaking his head in exasperation. Naruto would scratch the back of his head, grinning sheepishly. "Guess I'm just not cut out for this ninja stuff, huh?" The other students laughed, some with genuine amusement, others with disdain. But Naruto didn't care. Their opinions were as insignificant as ants beneath his feet. What mattered was maintaining the illusion of harmlessness. In truth, His chakra control had advanced far beyond that of his peers. He had even begun experimenting with integrating chakra-infused seals into his puppets, creating constructs that could function autonomously for brief periods. One night, Naruto's experiments took a dangerous turn. As he tested a new puppet, a hulking creature built from scavenged training dummies, it malfunctioned, lurching wildly before crashing into the wall. The resulting noise drew the attention of a passing shinobi. "Naruto. What are you doing in there?" Naruto froze, his mind racing. The shinobi's chakra signature was faint, his movements sluggish, likely a low-ranking guard. But even so, Naruto knew he couldn't afford to reveal his hand. When the shinobi kicked open the door, he found Naruto sitting amidst the wreckage, tears streaming down his face. "It broke," Naruto wailed, clutching a piece of the shattered puppet. "I was just trying to make a toy, and it broke." The shinobi sighed, his irritation melting into pity. "Kid, you shouldn't be messing around with this stuff. Leave the ninja tools to the professionals, all right?" Naruto sniffled, nodding meekly as the shinobi ruffled his hair and left. Once the door closed, Naruto's tearful expression vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating gaze. "Fool," he thought. "Even in failure, I learn. And when the time comes, you will all see the fruits of my labor." The first time Naruto felt the Nine-Tails' presence, it was subtle, a surge of energy so fleeting it could have been mistaken for a dream. But Mayuri's mind was a precision instrument, honed to detect even the faintest anomalies. This energy was not a product of the chakra exercises he'd been practicing, nor was it an external force. It emanated from within, a roaring furnace hidden behind a veil of flesh and bone. "So, the rumors are true," Naruto mused, reclining on his cot as moonlight filtered through the cracked window of his apartment. He closed his eyes, letting his consciousness sink into the depths of his mind. The transition was seamless. One moment, Naruto was lying in his room, the next, he stood in a cavernous chamber bathed in a hellish red glow. Massive iron bars loomed before him, their ends stretching into infinity. Behind them, two malevolent eyes glared down at him, brimming with disdain and ancient rage. "You." The voice was a guttural snarl, deep enough to shake the ground. "What insolence brings you here, whelp?" Naruto smiled, his expression calm despite the oppressive aura emanating from the beast. "So, you're the source of that fascinating energy." Kurama bared its fangs. "You dare speak to me with such impudence? I am the Nine-Tailed Fox, a being of destruction far beyond your comprehension." Rather than cower, Naruto tilted his head, his gaze analytical. "Destruction, you say? How quaint. But tell me, why does such a powerful creature waste its existence rotting behind bars?" Kurama roared, the sheer force of its anger causing the ground to quake. Naruto didn't flinch. If anything, he seemed amused. "You mock me?" Kurama thundered. "No," Naruto replied, his voice steady. "I'm offering you an opportunity." The fox's growl deepened, though a flicker of curiosity entered its eyes. Naruto's demeanor was unlike any Jinchuriki it had encountered. There was no fear, no blind rage, only an unnerving confidence. "Think about it," Naruto continued, pacing in front of the cage. "You're an entity of immense power, yet here you are, imprisoned by humans who fear what they can't control. It's pathetic, really. But..." He paused, turning to face Kurama directly. "What if you could shape the world instead of merely destroy it? Wouldn't that be more satisfying?" Kurama's laughter was a low, rumbling sound. "And you believe a mere child like you could offer me freedom? Don't insult me." Naruto's grin widened. "Not complete freedom, no. But partial freedom enough to let you stretch your legs, so to speak. In return, you'll lend me your power. Together, we'll dismantle the chains that bind us, starting with this village." The fox's eyes narrowed. And what happens when you decide you no longer need me? Shall I trade one cage for another? You misunderstand, Naruto said, his tone matter of fact. I have no intention of controlling you. I see you as a partner, not a tool. Your strength, your cunning, they're assets I respect. All I ask is for your cooperation. Refuse, and we can remain in this stalemate indefinitely. But let's be honest, neither of us is content with that outcome. For the first time in centuries, Kurama was silent. The beast's silence stretched, the air thick with tension. Finally, Kurama spoke, its voice softer but no less dangerous. You speak with the arrogance of someone who has yet to prove themselves. Why should I trust you? Naruto shrugged. You shouldn't. Trust is irrelevant. What matters is mutual benefit. You want freedom, I want power. Our goals align. That's all the reason we need. Kurama studied him, its fiery gaze boring into his very soul. You remind me of another human I once encountered, a cunning one, with silver hair. He, too, thought he could use me. And yet here you are, still trapped, Naruto countered. His mistake was arrogance without foresight. I am different. I plan for contingencies, for outcomes even I can't predict. And I promise you this, I will not fail. The fox chuckled, a low, menacing sound. Very well, human. I will lend you a fragment of my power. But make no mistake, if you betray me, you will suffer consequences beyond your imagination. Naruto's grin was almost feral. Deal. The moment the pact was sealed, Naruto felt a surge of energy unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It was raw, untamed, and exhilarating. His hands trembled as red chakras swirled around him, forming an ethereal cloak that crackled with latent fury. Fascinating, Naruto whispered, flexing his fingers. He could feel Kurama's power coursing through him, a violent storm barely held in check. Careful, boy, Kurama growled, its voice echoing in his mind. My chakra is not a toy. Wielded without control, and it will consume you. Control is what I do best, Naruto replied, his voice laced with determination. That night, Konoha witnessed an anomaly, a shadow darting across rooftops with inhuman speed, leaving scorch marks where it landed. Naruto tested his newfound power, leaping across the village with a precision that defied logic. His chakra-infused strikes shattered stone, and his reflexes allowed him to evade even the sharpest traps. For the first time, Naruto felt untouchable. But power alone wasn't enough for Naruto Mayuri. He needed to understand it, to dissect and refine it. Kurama's chakra became the subject of his experiments. He crafted intricate seals to channel and manipulate the energy, creating weapons and tools that augmented his abilities. One such creation was a blade forged from chakra-infused steel, its edge glowing with an ominous red hue. When Naruto tested it against a boulder, the blade sliced through the stone as if it were paper. Remarkable, he murmured, examining the blade. And this is only the beginning. Kurama watched from the recesses of his mind, a mix of amusement and unease. You tamper with forces you barely understand, human. Be careful you don't overreach. I'm not like the others, Naruto replied, his tone unyielding. I don't fear the unknown. I conquer it. As Naruto's experiments grew bolder, so too did the signs of his transformation. His physical prowess and cunning far outpaced his peers, drawing the attention of the academy instructors. Iruka, in particular, was both impressed and concerned. Naruto, you've improved drastically. But where is this coming from? Have you been training in secret? Naruto feigned innocence, scratching the back of his head with a sheepish grin. Guess I've just been working harder, Iruka-sensei. But beneath the mask of naivete, Naruto was already plotting his next move. The Forbidden Scroll incident, birth of the grotesque. Naruto crouched in the moonlit clearing, the enormous forbidden scroll spread open before him. Its aged parchment crackled as he flipped through the jutsu descriptions, his eyes scanning the intricate diagrams with an intensity far beyond his years. To anyone watching, he might have seemed like a desperate outcast grasping for power, but inside his mind, Mayuri's calculating voice whispered instructions. This scroll is a treasure trove, he thought. And yet, these techniques are so crude. They lack finesse, innovation. One entry caught his attention, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The concept intrigued him, not just clones, but physical, tangible replicas capable of independent action. His lips curled into a small smile. Replication, he murmured, his voice laced with curiosity. But why stop there? A true clone should evolve, adapt, transcend its creator's limitations. He stood and wove the hand seals with precision, his chakra flowing in controlled surges. When the first shadow clone materialized, Naruto Mayuri frowned. It was an identical copy, down to the smallest detail, a success by ordinary standards, but to him, it was a failure. An exact replica? How? Uninspired, he muttered. Dismissing the clone with a wave of his hand, he began to experiment. Drawing on his knowledge of biology, fragments of Mayuri's past life that lingered in his mind, he altered the flow of his chakra mid-formation, injecting it with subtle variations. The next clone emerged twisted and malformed. Its limbs were elongated, its eyes unevenly spaced, and its skin bore a translucent quality, revealing pulsating chakra veins beneath. Naruto studied the abomination with a detached fascination. Interesting. Imperfect, but promising. The clone growled, a guttural sound that echoed through the clearing before it dissipated in a puff of smoke. Hours passed as Naruto Mayuri refined his technique. He experimented with different chakra natures, combining elements in ways that defied conventional logic. Each iteration brought him closer to his vision, clones that were not mere copies, but autonomous beings with unique traits and capabilities. One clone had oversized arms, its fists encased in hardened chakra that could pulverize stone. Another possessed elongated fingers that crackled with lightning, capable of delivering precise, lethal shocks. Yet another had a grotesquely enlarged eye that swirled with unstable energy, granting it the ability to detect chakra signatures with pinpoint accuracy. By dawn, Naruto Mayuri stood amidst a small army of grotesque entities, each one radiating a distinct aura of menace. Perfection, he whispered, a grin spreading across his face. As Naruto Mayuri admired his creations, Mizuki arrived, his expression a mixture of smugness and malice. Naruto, you idiot. Hand over the scroll, and I'll let you off easy, Mizuki sneered. Naruto tilted his head, his expression blank. You're not here to teach me anything, are you? Mizuki smirked. Smart for once. That scroll isn't for a failure like you. Give it to me, and maybe I'll put in a good word for you. Naruto didn't respond immediately. Instead, he raised his hand, and one of his grotesque clones stepped forward. Its malformed body shuddered with barely contained energy, and its glowing eyes fixed on Mizuki like a predator sizing up prey. Mizuki took a step back, his confidence faltering. What is that thing? A prototype, Naruto said casually. But effective enough. With a flick of his wrist, he sent the clone hurtling toward Mizuki. The creature moved with unnatural speed, its elongated arms swinging like wrecking balls. Mizuki barely had time to draw his kunai before the clone was upon him, its fists colliding with the ground where he'd stood moments earlier, leaving a crater in its wake. Panic set in as Mizuki realized he was outmatched. He hurled a barrage of shuriken at Naruto, but the boy didn't flinch. Another clone intercepted the projectiles, its hardened skin deflecting them effortlessly. You think you're some kind of genius, don't you? Mizuki shouted, his voice tinged with desperation. Naruto smirked. No, not a genius. An artist. With that, he commanded his clones to attack in unison. They moved with eerie coordination, their grotesque forms weaving around Mizuki's defenses. One delivered a bone-crushing blow to his ribs, while another grabbed his ankle and yanked him to the ground. The final strike came from a clone with serrated chakra blades for fingers, its attack stopping mere inches from Mizuki's throat. "Enough," Naruto said, his voice cold. The clones froze, their grotesque features illuminated by the soft glow of the rising sun. Mizuki lay trembling on the ground, too terrified to move. What are you?" Naruto crouched beside him, his expression unreadable. "I am evolution." "And you?" He gestured dismissively. "You're obsolete." When Iruka arrived moments later, he found Mizuki unconscious and Naruto standing amidst the dissipating remains of his clones. The boy turned to him, his face breaking into an innocent smile. "I stopped him, Iruka-sensei," he said cheerfully, feigning exhaustion. Iruka looked from the battered Mizuki to the strangely calm Naruto. He had questions, but for now, relief took precedence. "You did well, Naruto," he said, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. But as Iruka led him back to the village, Naruto Mayuri's mind was already racing. The modified shadow clone jutsu was just the beginning. With this technique, he thought, I can build an army. No, a civilization. Each creation, a masterpiece. And Konoha, they'll either recognize my genius or be destroyed by it. The journey to the land of waves began like any other mission. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura trudged along the dirt road behind their sensei, Kakashi, as they escorted Tazuna, the grizzled bridge builder who couldn't seem to keep his disdain for shinobi hidden. Naruto Mayuri, however, saw this mission as something more, a stage for experimentation, a laboratory to test the limits of his grotesque creations. The first test came earlier than expected. As they crossed a narrow path surrounded by thick forest, two masked ninja burst from the shadows, their chains slicing through the air like venomous snakes. Kakashi, ever the seasoned shinobi, feigned vulnerability to observe his students' reactions. Sasuke moved instinctively, hurling a kunao to pin one of the attackers to a tree. Sakura froze in fear. Naruto Mayuri stepped forward, his hand forming a single seal. A grotesque shadow clone materialized beside him, a towering figure with elongated limbs, claws of hardened chakra, and a single, glowing eye. The creature moved with terrifying speed, intercepting the remaining attacker. Its claws shredded through the man's defenses with surgical precision, leaving him crumpled on the ground. Blood seeped into the soil as the clone dissipated with a sinister hiss. Sasuke's eyes widened. What was that? Naruto tilted his head, feigning ignorance. A shadow clone, he said with a grin, though his tone carried a chilling undercurrent. The team reached Tazuna's home after days of tension-filled travel. The old man's family greeted them warmly, though their cheer barely masked the fear in their eyes. Gado's tyranny had left scars on the land of waves, and even Naruto Mayuri felt a flicker of contempt for the corrupt businessman. But emotions held no place in his plans. As the team settled in, Naruto retreated to a secluded corner of the house, sketching intricate diagrams in a stolen notebook. Each design represented a new possibility, a fusion of chakra, biology, and ingenuity. Zabuza and his accomplice will come, he thought. And when they do, I'll show them the true meaning of evolution. Zabuza Momoki's arrival was announced by a thick mist that blanketed the bridge. The air grew heavy, and visibility dropped to mere feet. Kakashi immediately took charge, activating his Sharingan as he engaged Zabuza in a deadly dance of steel and strategy. Meanwhile, Haku emerged, her delicate features masking the lethality of her icy senbon. She moved toward the genin, her gaze fixated on Sasuke. Naruto Mayuri stepped forward, his hand forming the familiar seal. Don't interfere, Dobe, Sasuke growled, preparing his own counterattack. But Naruto ignored him, summoning not one but 3 grotesque clones. Each was uniquely deformed, one with spiked, crystalline arms, another with a bulbous, pulsating torso, and the last with segmented limbs that moved like a predatory insect. Haku hesitated, her mask betraying no emotion, but her body language spoke volumes. She was unnerved. The clones attacked as a coordinated unit, their inhuman movements defying conventional logic. The crystalline-armed clones shattered Haku's ice mirrors with a single swing, while the segmented-limbed one darted around her defenses, forcing her into a corner. "These aren't shadow clones," she murmured, her voice trembling. Naruto Mayuri smirked. "No, they're improvements." Zabuza, locked in combat with Kakashi, caught glimpses of the chaos unfolding around Haku. His water clones, once a formidable obstacle, were being torn apart by Naruto's creations. "Your brat's got a dark side, huh?" Zabuza sneered, directing the comment at Kakashi. Kakashi speared a glance at Naruto, his expression unreadable. "He's resourceful," he admitted, though the unease in his voice was evident. The battle intensified, but the tide had shifted. Naruto's grotesque clones overwhelmed Haku, her movements growing desperate as she tried to fend him off. Finally, the pulsating clone lunged, its chakra-infused claws piercing her defenses and pinning her to the ground. "Don't kill her," Naruto Mayuri commanded, stepping forward as his clones restrained Haku. Sasuke glared at him. "What are you doing? Finish her." "Patience," Naruto said, his voice calm. "She's valuable." Ignoring his teammates' protests, Naruto knelt beside Haku. Her breathing was labored, and blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. "You're strong," he said, his tone almost kind. "But strength alone isn't enough. I can make you better." Before she could respond, he reached into his pouch and withdrew a syringe filled with a viscous, glowing liquid, a concoction he'd been developing in secret. "Naruto, stop!" Kakashi shouted, but it was too late. Naruto injected the liquid into Haku's arm, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Her body convulsed as the serum took effect, her chakra flaring wildly. For a moment, it seemed she might tear herself apart, but then the spasm ceased. Haku's breathing steadied, and when she opened her eyes, they glowed with an unnatural light. Her movements were stiff, almost mechanical, as she rose to her feet. "What have you done to me?" she whispered, her voice hollow. Naruto Mayuri smiled. "I've given you a gift. You're the first of many." The battle ended with Zabuza's defeat. Gato and his men arrived, only to be swiftly dispatched by the combined efforts of Team 7 and the now modified Haku, who moved with inhuman precision. But the victory left a bitter aftertaste. Kakashi confronted Naruto as they prepared to leave the Land of Waves. "What you did to Haku, it was wrong," Kakashi said, his tone heavy with disappointment. Naruto tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "Wrong? I saved her. Improved her. She's stronger now, more efficient. Isn't that what being a shinobi is about?" Kakashi sighed, realizing there was no reasoning with him. "Just remember, Naruto power without humanity is a dangerous thing." As they departed, Naruto Mayuri glanced back at the bridge. In his mind, it wasn't a monument to unity or hope. It was a stepping stone, a symbol of what could be achieved through experimentation and ingenuity. "This is just the beginning," he thought. "The shinobi world will learn to fear my creations. And when they do, they'll see the genius they tried to suppress." The sun set behind the towering walls of Konoha, casting long shadows over the village. Team 7, newly returned from the Land of Waves, was tasked with recovering from their brutal mission. However, as peaceful as the village seemed, an undercurrent of unease had begun to stir. Kakashi, ever the vigilant shinobi, was growing more concerned about his students, particularly Naruto. Naruto had always been unpredictable, but ever since the Land of Waves, something felt off. Kakashi couldn't put his finger on it. It wasn't just that Naruto's behavior had shifted, it was more than that. The boy had always been reckless, full of energy and bluster, but now there was a calculating coldness to him, something hidden behind that ever-present smile. Kakashi watched from the shadows as Naruto, with an eerie calm, worked on his experiments during their downtime at the village. Instead of training with his teammates, he would retreat to a secluded part of the village or the woods, where he could work in peace. The other members of Team 7 seemed oblivious. Sasuke was focused on his own ambitions, determined to surpass his brother, and Sakura, still enamored with Sasuke, hardly noticed the change in Naruto. But Kakashi couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper brewing beneath the surface. It was one evening after a particularly brutal training session when Sakura finally began to notice. She had been walking back to the village from the training grounds when she spotted Naruto in the distance, crouched down in the dirt, his hands moving rapidly over something. Curiosity piqued. She approached, but froze as she saw what he was doing. Naruto was bent over a grotesque figure, his hands glowing with chakra as he worked to attach jagged pieces of metal and bone to what seemed to be a human body. The figure, the creature twitching unnaturally, was almost human in shape, but its movements and the way it seemed to flicker in and out of focus screamed of something darker. Its eyes glowed with a strange, ethereal light, and its body was held together by intricate chakra threads that hummed ominously. Sakura stumbled back, heart pounding in her chest. She had always known Naruto was different, but this was beyond what she could have ever imagined. She took a cautious step forward, but Naruto's sharp gaze met hers, and her breath caught in her throat. "Don't be so loud," Naruto said with an unsettling calm, as if he hadn't just been manipulating a grotesque creature. "You'll ruin it." What are you doing?" Sakura asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and disbelief. Naruto's eyes glinted with an eerie amusement. "I'm improving the human form. You wouldn't understand." He turned his attention back to the creature, adjusting the chakra flow with a precision that made Sakura shiver. "But why?" Sakura asked, still unable to tear her eyes away from the creature. "This isn't normal, Naruto." He paused, a faint smile curling at the corner of his lips. "Normal? Who needs normal when you can be better?" Sakura felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She didn't know what to say, but she couldn't stay here any longer. She turned and fled, running back toward the village with the image of the creature burned into her mind. The following day, Sasuke approached Naruto as the team gathered in the training grounds. Sasuke had noticed a shift in Naruto as well. His growing power was impossible to ignore, but it was his method of achieving that power that intrigued Sasuke. "You're getting stronger," Sasuke said, his eyes narrowing slightly as he regarded Naruto. "Too strong for your own good, don't you think?" Naruto gave Sasuke a casual glance, his usual grin never faltering. "Don't worry about me, Sasuke. You've got your own goals. Focus on them." But Sasuke wasn't so easily dismissed. He knew that Naruto had always pushed himself beyond normal limits, but the recent power he had displayed especially in the Land of Waves had been on an entirely different level. The way his clones moved, how they tore through the enemy with brutal efficiency, unnerved Sasuke. But it also intrigued him. The potential that Naruto had tapped into was undeniable. "What is it?" Sasuke asked, his voice low. "How are you getting so strong?" Naruto's gaze flickered briefly, the smile on his face never wavered. "You could say I've been experimenting." Sasuke's interest piqued further. "Experimenting?" he echoed, though he wasn't sure if Naruto was mocking him. "What kind of experiments?" Naruto leaned in, lowering his voice just enough for Sasuke to hear. "The kind that change you. The kind that make you evolve beyond what you think is possible." Sasuke studied him, trying to understand if Naruto was just playing with him or if there was truth behind his words. "Sounds dangerous." Everything worth doing is, Naruto replied cryptically, his eyes glinting with an intensity that Sasuke couldn't ignore. Sasuke knew, then, that Naruto wasn't just playing the part of an underdog anymore. He was something more. Something dangerous. Kakashi's suspicions continued to grow. The more he observed Naruto, the more certain he became that the boy was hiding something. He couldn't pinpoint it, but Naruto's actions, his calm demeanor in the face of danger, and his increasing strength it all seemed too calculated, too unnatural. One night, Kakashi decided to follow Naruto discreetly. He waited until the others were asleep and then trailed the boy as he made his way toward the outskirts of the village. Kakashi kept his distance, watching as Naruto entered the dense woods, where no one could see him. When Naruto finally stopped, Kakashi remained hidden in the shadows, waiting for him to make a move. What he saw next sent a chill down his spine. Naruto raised his hands and began forming seals, chakra flowing from him in a steady, deliberate rhythm. In a flash, several monstrous clones appeared around him, each more grotesque than the last. The creatures were humanoid but with twisted limbs, their features inhuman, their eyes glowing with the same eerie light Kakashi had seen in the Land of Waves. Naruto watched them move, his expression a mixture of amusement and satisfaction. Perfect, he muttered to himself, his fingers twitching slightly as he adjusted the chakra binding the clones together. Kakashi's mind raced. These weren't just shadow clones, they were something far more sinister, the result of twisted experiments that defied the natural order. Kakashi knew he had to confront Naruto, but he also knew it wouldn't be easy. The boy was too dangerous now. The next day, after another day of missions and training, Kakashi decided it was time to speak with Naruto. He found the boy alone in the woods, working on one of his experiments once more. Kakashi approached, stepping into the clearing with calculated calm. "Naruto," Kakashi said, his voice firm. Naruto didn't look up. "What is it, sensei? Shouldn't you be training your precious Sharingan?" Kakashi's expression darkened. "What are you doing, Naruto? What's all this about your experiments?" Naruto finally turned, his grin still plastered across his face. But there was something more in his eyes now, something dangerous. "Just improving myself, Kakashi. Just improving." "You're tampering with things you don't understand," Kakashi warned. "These aren't just simple jutsu, Naruto. This is something darker." "Dark?" Naruto laughed, his voice eerie in the quiet of the forest. "Kakashi, you're just afraid of change. You've all been afraid of me ever since I stopped being the fool you wanted me to be." Kakashi clenched his fists, struggling to keep his composure. "If you keep going down this path, Naruto, you'll lose yourself." Naruto tilted his head, studying Kakashi with an unreadable expression. "I've already lost myself, sensei. And I've never felt more alive." The air between them crackled with tension, a quiet understanding passing between the two. Kakashi could no longer teach Naruto. There was no reaching the boy who had become something else. As Team 7 returned to Konoha, the village's once peaceful atmosphere was forever shattered. Kakashi couldn't bring himself to tell the village about what Naruto had become, not yet. But he couldn't ignore the fact that Naruto was growing stronger, more dangerous, and more unpredictable with every passing day. Sakura, disturbed by what she had witnessed, kept her distance from Naruto. Sasuke, however, saw an opportunity. He saw strength, real, raw power, something that could help him in his quest for revenge. He would stand beside Naruto, for now. But no one knew the full extent of the darkness that Naruto harbored. And as he watched the sun set over Konoha, Naruto Mayuri's smile grew colder. He had only just begun. The sun hung high in the sky as the first round of the Chunin exams began, casting a warm light over the Hidden Leaf village. The villagers, shinobi, and foreign dignitaries crowded the stadium, eagerly awaiting the spectacle. However, There was an undercurrent of tension in the air, an unsettling feeling that something more sinister than just a mere test of strength was about to unfold. Team 7 had arrived earlier than most, though the dynamics between them had shifted since the days of their first missions together. Naruto, once the exuberant, prank-loving outcast, was now a figure of quiet calculation. Sasuke remained as brooding as ever, his focus unyielding in pursuit of his vengeance. Sakura, torn between loyalty to Sasuke and her growing unease about Naruto, watched her teammate with apprehension. Yet, none could deny that Naruto had changed. His training, his experiments, and his growing power had created a new presence in the village, one that whispered of danger. The second stage of the Chunin exams was infamous for its brutality, set in the ominous forest of death, where only the strongest would survive. The teens were sent into the woods to retrieve 2 scrolls from different locations, all while avoiding deadly creatures, rival ninjas, and the unforgiving environment. Naruto, as always, was an anomaly. His team had already gathered one of the scrolls, but while Sasuke and Sakura focused on surviving, Naruto had his own plans. The strange, otherworldly energy that had been swirling around him for the past several weeks had begun to settle. His experiments had taken a dark turn, and now, deep in the heart of the forest, it was time to test his creation. Sasuke, who had been on edge from the start, noticed something was off when he heard the mechanical clicking from the shadows. "Naruto," he called out, wary. "What are you doing?" Naruto's eyes glowed with an eerie light, a twisted grin curling on his lips. "Nothing. Just a little experiment." With that, Naruto stepped forward, his hands forming intricate seals. From his back, the air shimmered as something massive began to take shape, an abomination of both metal and flesh. It was an enormous, grotesque puppet, stitched together from remnants of chakra-infused tools, the remains of defeated beasts, and twisted organic materials Naruto had found. Its eyes, gleaming with unnatural light, locked onto the rival team ahead. The puppets were no longer just simple creations of chakra manipulation. This was something more, something darker. As the creature's massive form rose, its chakra-powered limbs moved with terrifying precision. The mechanical limbs and jagged metal plates made grinding sounds as they shifted, each movement sending ripples through the air. The organic parts, veins and muscles pumped with the pulse of life, creating a horrifying blend of biology and technology. "Go," Naruto ordered, his voice calm, detached. Without hesitation, the puppet lumbered forward, cutting through the dense trees and underbrush, closing in on the unsuspecting team that had foolishly come into its path. The rival ninjas never stood a chance. The puppet's enormous claws tore through their defenses, its movements erratic and swift, powered by the dark chakra Naruto had infused into it. As the puppet ripped through the last of the enemies, Naruto looked on with a detached, almost clinical gaze. "What do you think, Sasuke?" Naruto asked, not taking his eyes off the destruction he had wrought. Sasuke, having been quiet until now, watched in stunned silence. "You're insane." But Naruto merely smiled, a twisted gleam in his eyes. "No, Sasuke. I'm evolving." The excitement and bloodshed continued into the preliminary rounds of the Chunin exams, a series of one-on-one battles that would determine who would make it to the final round. The crowd was buzzing with energy as the fights began, but one match stood out among the rest: Naruto versus Kiba Inyazuka. Kiba, full of brash confidence, was prepared to defeat Naruto swiftly. With his sharp senses and his loyal canine companion Akamaru by his side, he believed he had the upper hand. However, Naruto's calm demeanor as he stepped into the arena unsettled Kiba. The entire situation felt off. "Ready to lose, loser," Kiba taunted, a grin stretching across his face. Naruto's response was cold, his voice lacking the usual joviality that had once defined him. "We'll see." The battle began with Kiba charging at Naruto, his senses heightened, Akamaru leaping forward to attack. But Naruto was already prepared. His hands moved quickly, performing seals with uncanny precision. Without warning, a dozen shadow clones appeared, each one a grotesque and twisted version of a human figure. They were an amalgamation of chakra, metal, and flesh, their bodies shifting unnaturally with each movement. Kiba's eyes widened as he tried to fend off the clones, but they moved faster than he could react, their attacks swift and brutal. Akamaru lunged at one clone, only for it to snap its arm out with a speed that left the dog yelping in pain. Kiba, realizing the situation was deteriorating, attempted to use his special techniques, relying on his strength and ferocity to overpower his opponent. But Naruto had other plans. With the calm wave of his hand, a single clone stepped forward, carrying a strange orb of swirling chakra. "This is a gift," Naruto said, his voice distant. "Enjoy it." Before Kiba could react, the clone detonated. The explosion was violent, releasing a toxic chakra mist that spread rapidly throughout the arena. Kiba, already in mid-charge, inhaled the toxic fumes, his body seizing up as his lungs were filled with the corrosive energy. The crowd gasped in horror as Kiba collapsed, writhing in pain. Akamaru, now at his side, whimpered as his master's body was consumed by the toxic chakra. Kiba's once proud form lay on the ground, gasping for breath, his entire body trembling. Naruto stood, watching impassively, as his clone's toxic chakra spread over the battlefield. The arena, once filled with excitement, now felt eerily silent, save for Kiba's agonized cries. Kakashi watched from the sidelines, his face grim. He knew Naruto was capable of great power, but this was cruelty. The medics rushed to Kiba's aid, but it was clear the boy would not recover for days. Naruto's self-destructive clone had done its job, incapacitating his opponent with no regard for the consequences. The arena fell silent as Naruto turned away, his expression unreadable. He had no interest in the spectacle. This was just another step in his evolution. As the exams continued, Naruto's behavior began to attract more attention. Whispers of his actions reached the ears of Orochimaru, who was in attendance, watching the tournament from the shadows. The legendary rogue ninja had always been intrigued by power, but Naruto was something new, a perfect combination of raw strength, intellect, and a disregard for human limits. After the exams, when the dust had settled and the winners had been chosen, Orochimaru approached Naruto, his presence both intimidating and magnetic. Naruto was alone in the forest outside the village, his mind already focused on the next stage of his plans. He heard the soft crunch of leaves behind him and knew immediately that someone was approaching. "You're an interesting one," a voice purred from the shadows. Naruto didn't flinch, didn't even turn around. He was used to this, used to being watched, studied. "I know what you're thinking," Naruto said, his voice cold. "You want me to join you?" Orochimaru stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with dark amusement. "Indeed. Your potential is considerable. I see the future in your hands, Naruto. Together, we could accomplish things that would make the rest of the world tremble." Naruto's lips curled into a thin smile. "You think I need you?" "I don't need a partner, Orochimaru. I'm beyond that. I'm not interested in your petty schemes. You're just another rival to me." Orochimaru raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. "So you want to compete with me, then?" "Exactly," Naruto replied, turning to face Orochimaru for the first time, his eyes glowing with an intensity that sent a shiver down the older ninja's spine. "If I'm going to shape the world, I'll do it alone. Your path ends here." Orochimaru chuckled softly, not offended, but intrigued. "Very well. You'll come around eventually. I always find those who defy me, eventually." Naruto didn't respond. Instead, he turned away, his mind already moving forward with the next stage of his plans. Orochimaru might have been powerful, but he was nothing more than a stepping stone. The Chunin exams ended in a flurry of excitement, with Naruto's actions having caused a ripple throughout the village. His victory in the arena had stunned everyone, and his disinterest in the rules of the tournament had left the villagers questioning his true nature. Some viewed him as a hero, others as a monster. But to Naruto, it didn't matter. As the sun set over Konoha, Naruto stood alone, watching the shadows grow longer across the village. The time for games was over. His path had already been set, and there was no turning back now. The world would bend to his will, and anyone who opposed him would be crushed beneath the weight of his ambition. The Hidden Leaf Village had long been a symbol of strength and order, but beneath the facade of peace, cracks were beginning to form. In the dead of night, as the village slept, a different kind of power was stirring, one that whispered through the trees, seeping into the very foundation of Konoha itself. Naruto had already outgrown the bounds of a simple ninja. His mind, twisted by years of neglect, experimentation, and the growing whispers of Kurama's chakra, had led him down a dark path. What had begun as small modifications to the shadow clones, twisted puppets made of flesh and metal, had now evolved into something far worse. In the forest of death, deep within the heart of his underground lab, Naruto toiled. He had grown proficient in his craft, his knowledge of biology and chakra manipulation blending together to create creations unlike anything the world had ever seen. They were monstrous, grotesque abominations of flesh, metal, and chakra. Each one powered by Kurama's vast energy, they were living, breathing machines, puppets of unimaginable strength, with no mind but his own. Naruto had long since abandoned the innocent boy the village had once known. In his place stood a figure determined to break free of the chains Konoha had shackled him with. The villagers were nothing more than tools, and he would make them serve him. He had begun his experiments by abducting the weakest of the villagers, those who wouldn't be missed. They were brought to the forest of death, never to be seen again. With each new victim, his creations grew more powerful, more terrifying. The bodies of the villagers were transformed, their chakra infused into the abominations that crawled through the shadows of his underground lab. One night, Naruto ventured into the village once more, his cloak drawn over his head, his presence barely noticeable to the patrols that watched the streets. He entered homes in silence, carrying off his new victims in the night. By dawn, they would be gone, nothing more than whispers and rumors among the village's populace. But the village wasn't blind. The disappearance of villagers had begun to draw attention, and soon, the Hokage's attention was focused on Naruto. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, had long known there was something unsettling about Naruto. The boy had never truly fit into the mold of a traditional ninja. He was a force of chaos, a puzzle that could never be solved. But even the Hokage couldn't ignore the growing rumors of abductions and the strange occurrences surrounding the forest of death. Late one evening, as Naruto continued his dark work, a shadow fell across his lab. The air grew still as an old, familiar presence arrived. Hiruzen, his face heavy with years of leadership and responsibility, stood at the entrance of the lab, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. Naruto, the Hokage's voice was firm, but there was no anger, only a quiet understanding. This path you are on, it will lead you to nothing but ruin. Naruto looked up, his eyes glowing with a cold, eerie light. The boy, no, the monster who had once been a hopeful child, now stared back at the Hokage, his expression unreadable. You're too late, Hokage, Naruto said, his voice soft but carrying a weight that could shatter worlds. I've already left Konoha behind. This village never accepted me. It never saw me for what I am. So now, I'll show them. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto's grotesque creations began to stir from the shadows. They had been dormant until now, but at his command, they surged forward, massive, monstrous figures, each one a blend of flesh, metal, and chakra. Their eyes glowed with Kurama's energy, and their movements were unnaturally precise. The Hokage's face hardened as he saw the army Naruto had amassed. It was an army of horrors, puppets of destruction that could tear through Konoha's defenses in an instant. I'm not here to stop you, Naruto, Hiruzen said. I'm here to save you from yourself. But Naruto only smiled, the expression twisted and cold. Save me? I don't need saving. I'm the one who will reshape this world. And Konoha will be the first to fall. With a wave of his hand, Naruto's creation surged forward, and the battle began. The third Hokage had faced countless threats in his lifetime, but nothing had prepared him for the abominations Naruto had created. These were not just puppets or clones, they were living, breathing creatures, with the power of Kurama's chakra fueling their every movement. Each step they took caused the ground to tremble, each swing of their monstrous limbs tore through the forest and earth. Hiruzen's mind raced as he analyzed the situation. He knew Naruto had grown powerful, too powerful, but he had never imagined this level of destruction. The Hokage summoned his chakra, preparing to fight back with all his might. His Rasengan and Jutsu flared as he moved to strike down the abominations. But the creatures were relentless. They tore through the Hokage's defenses with terrifying speed and strength. Hiruzen was forced to retreat, using his experience and tactics to buy time, but Naruto was always one step ahead, his creations adapting and overwhelming him at every turn. Is this it, Hokage? Naruto's voice rang out through the chaos. Is this all you have to offer? The third Hokage gritted his teeth. He had to stop this madness, had to save Naruto from the darkness that had overtaken him. But with each passing moment, it became clear that his power alone might not be enough. The battle raged for hours, neither side willing to relent. The village watched in horror as the Hokage fought desperately to hold back Naruto's monstrous creations, knowing that if the Hokage failed, Konoha itself would fall. In the end, the Hokage had no choice but to retreat. Naruto had prepared for this moment, knowing that Konoha would try to stop him. He had anticipated the Hokage's resistance, and he had planned accordingly. You were never going to stop me, Naruto whispered to himself as he stood victorious over the battlefield. The third Hokage, battered and exhausted, retreated to the village, his mind heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. Konoha's leadership, shaken by the battle and the chaos left in its wake, moved quickly. Naruto was officially branded a traitor. The once beloved orphan, the son of the fourth Hokage, was now a fugitive and enemy of the village he had once called home. But Naruto was long gone by the time the decision was made. He had already left the ruins of Konoha behind, his monstrous army marching with him. The village's chains, once thought to bind him, were now broken. He had escaped, and there was no turning back. The Leaf Village, once a symbol of unity and strength, lay in ruins. The damage had been done, and Naruto was no longer the boy who had sought recognition. Now, he was something far worse, a force of nature, a being beyond the grasp of Konoha's leadership. And as the village mourned, Naruto's laughter echoed through the night, a cold reminder that the world had only just begun to feel the weight of his rebellion. Konoha had fallen, but Naruto's path had only just begun. He was no longer a child seeking acknowledgement, he was a force to be reckoned with, an unstoppable tide of darkness and destruction. As the sun set over the burning village, Naruto stood atop a hill, overlooking the crumbling remains of his former home. His monstrous army stood at attention behind him, the glow of Kurama's chakras still burning brightly in their eyes. The future was his now, and there would be no one to stand in his way. The chains that had bound him were broken, and the world would tremble beneath the weight of his will. Konoha would be the first of many to fall. And Naruto, once a boy lost in the shadows, would now be the shadow that consumed the world. In the heart of the forest of death, where the wind whispered through the leaves and the shadows danced like specters, Naruto's underground lair hummed with a sinister energy. The walls of his sanctum, lined with twisted and malformed creations, pulsed with the dark rhythm of his power chakra-infused abominations of flesh and metal, each an intricate fusion of his intelligence, ambition, and Kurama's overwhelming chakra. These were not mere puppets or clones, they were the next stage in human evolution, the true perfection he sought. Naruto's power had grown exponentially since his escape from Konoha, and as he sculpted life from the very fabric of the universe, his vision began to take form. He was no longer just a former shinobi seeking recognition. He was a god in the making, and those who dared to challenge him would soon learn the cost of such arrogance. The Akatsuki had taken notice of him. They were a gathering of renegades, powerful outcasts who sought to harness the power of the tailed beasts for their own purposes. Their mission: capture and control the Jinchuriki, including the Nine Tails, Kurama, sealed within Naruto. They were relentless in their pursuit, and it was only a matter of time before they arrived at his door. But Naruto welcomed their coming. In his mind, they were nothing more than mere tools, flawed creations, each one a perfect specimen in their own right, but still inferior to his own genius. Their thirst for power was something he could understand, but unlike them, he had the means to achieve his ambitions on a level they could never hope to reach. So when Deidara and Sasori, two of the most formidable members of the Akatsuki, were dispatched to capture him, Naruto already had a plan in motion. His lair was a maze of traps, a twisted reflection of his own mind, a sanctuary where no one could touch him. Not unless he allowed it. The destruction of Konoha was inevitable. It had always been inevitable. Naruto stood atop the ruins of the once proud village, now little more than ashes and crumbled stone beneath his feet. The blood of countless shinobi soaked the earth beneath him, a testament to the countless battles he'd fought and the many lives he had extinguished. The Hokage monument, a symbol of Konoha's proud history, had been reduced to nothing but jagged remnants, the faces of his predecessors now erased from existence. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. He had already torn apart the system that had bound him for so long. Now, the entire shinobi world would feel his wrath. Naruto's path had been set long before he decided to leave the village. Konoha had cast him aside, belittled him, and forced him into the role of the villain. His very existence had been a burden to the village, and that had only fueled his desire to see it burn. But it was more than that. He was not merely seeking vengeance. He sought something more. Power. Control. The ability to bend the world to his will. And now, with the full force of Kurama's chakra flowing through his veins, there was no limit to what he could achieve. It had taken years to reach this point, years of plotting, experimenting, and manipulating those around him. The village's denizens had never seen it coming. They had never seen the quiet boy grow into a monster who would reshape the very world itself. Naruto had been planning his independence from Konoha for years. The years he spent in secret training, the forbidden techniques he mastered, the experiments he conducted in his underground lab, all had been preparations for this day. He had built an empire in secret, a fortress in the ruins of Uzushiagakuer, the home of his ancestors, where he would wage his war against the world that had betrayed him. But it wasn't enough to simply tear down the walls of Konoha. He needed more. He needed a weapon. A force that would spread across the nations and bring every shinobi village to its knees. And so, using the power of Kurama, he had begun crafting his army. Naruto's fortress in Uzushiagakuer was not just a sanctuary, it was a laboratory. Deep within its dark halls, he had begun to experiment with Kurama's chakra, creating new forms of life puppets that were far beyond the limitations of human understanding. He had learned the art of crafting life, and now he would perfect it. The first step was embedding fragments of Kurama's chakra into the bodies of his creations. These artificial Jinchuriki were not mere puppets. They were vessels of pure power, infused with the destructive chakra of the Nine Tails. Naruto had learned to control the immense power of Kurama, but he wanted to make it his own. And so, he had found a way to duplicate it. Each of these abominations was a twisted mockery of the original Jinchuriki creations that were far more powerful than any human could ever hope to be. The fragments of Kurama's chakra gave them strength beyond comprehension, while Naruto's intellect and craftsmanship turned them into living weapons. He named them the Cage of the New Dawn. They were his generals, each one imbued with a portion of Kurama's power, and each one would lead his army in the war against the shinobi world. Their bodies were grotesque, half-human, half-machine creatures born from the fusion of chakra and metal, twisted into horrifying shapes. Their eyes glowed with the same fiery intensity as Naruto's own, a reflection of the beast's fury that lived within them. Once they were ready, Naruto sent them out across the world. He didn't need to attack the shinobi villages directly, not yet. He would let his creations do the work for him. The Cage of the New Dawn were to be his agents of chaos, spreading destruction wherever they went. The first wave of attacks came swiftly. The hidden sand was the first to fall, its walls torn asunder by the sheer power of the artificial Jinchuriki. The Cage of the New Dawn tore through the village like a plague, their chakra-infused bodies smashing through buildings, leveling entire districts, and slaughtering anyone who stood in their way. No one could stop them. They were unstoppable, each one an embodiment of Naruto's power and ambition. The hidden stone, the hidden mist, and the hidden cloud soon followed. Naruto had given no warning, and his forces showed no mercy. The shinobi villages were shattered, their leaders helpless against the onslaught. The Cage of the New Dawn unleashed their power with reckless abandon, flooding the villages with chaos and destruction. Whole families were torn apart, entire clans wiped from existence, all in the name of a world that would bend to Naruto's will. The world had underestimated him for too long. And now, they would pay. As the war spread, the remaining shinobi villages scrambled to form an alliance. The Hokage, the Raikage, the Tsuchikage, and the Mizukage convened in secret, meeting in a place far from prying eyes. They were terrified of what Naruto had become, but they knew that they had no choice but to fight back. The Cage of the New Dawn had slaughtered their forces with ease, and every attempt to retaliate had been met with failure. The Cage were not fools. They knew that the key to stopping Naruto lay in understanding his power. But they had no idea how to defeat him. His forces were too strong, his power too vast, and his creations far beyond anything they could comprehend. "It's a war of attrition," the Hokage said, his voice low. "We fight, but we cannot win. The world is crumbling before us, and we have nothing left to fight with." The Mizukage looked to the others, her face set in a grim expression. "We must find Naruto. We must strike at the heart of his power. If we cannot stop him now, there will be nothing left to save." But they were too late. By the time the Shinobi Alliance had mustered their forces, Naruto's war machine was already unstoppable. His cage had torn through the greatest shinobi forces with terrifying efficiency, leaving no one standing. The world that had once been united under the banner of the 5 great shinobi nations was now a shattered, fragmented wasteland, with only the ashes of a past civilization remaining. Naruto's message was clear. Konoha had fallen. The shinobi world had been crushed. And there was no turning back. Naruto watched from the ruins of his fortress, his eyes glowing with an intense fire that matched the storm raging outside. The world had fallen into chaos, just as he had planned. His Cage of the New Dawn had decimated the villages, one by one, and the shinobi world was on the brink of extinction. But there was still more to be done. He could feel the resistance building, the last remnants of the shinobi nations coming together in one final effort to stop him. It was a futile attempt, but Naruto welcomed it. His power had reached its zenith, and there was no force on earth that could stand against him. The last battle would be his to win. Naruto stood at the edge of his fortress, looking out over the desolate world he had created. He could feel the weight of his power, the weight of Kurama's chakra, pressing down on him like a heavy mantle. It was a power that no one could hope to rival. But even as the remnants of the shinobi world prepared their final assault, Naruto knew that there was one last step to take. The world would be his, but he would remake it in his own image. He would burn it all down and build something new, something perfect, something unstoppable. As the final battle began, Naruto's heart beat with an unshakable resolve. The war had only just begun. The battle for the shinobi world was over. Naruto had emerged victorious, and the remnants of the once proud shinobi nations had been reduced to nothing. The cage of the New Dawn now ruled, their reign unchallenged as they stood at the head of Naruto's empire. The world was broken, but it would soon be remade. The war had been brutal, but Naruto had achieved his goal. He had declared his independence, torn down the foundations of the shinobi world, and forged a new path, a path that would lead to his ultimate victory. And with that, the age of the shinobi had ended. A new world would rise from the ashes. A world where Naruto Uzumaki was its king. Deidara, the flamboyant artist with a fondness for explosive creations, landed on the outskirts of the forest with a smile on his face. His clay birds fluttered about, signaling his arrival, but there was no doubt in his mind that the hunt for Naruto would be anything but easy. His sculpted bombs could destroy villages, and yet, something about this mission felt different. He could sense that Naruto was no ordinary target. Beside him stood Sasori, the stoic, calculating puppeteer whose mastery over human life had made him one of the most feared individuals in the Akatsuki. He was intrigued by the rumors surrounding Naruto, whispers of a boy who had defied the odds and created monstrosities beyond the scope of human understanding. Sasori had no doubt that this would be an interesting encounter. The two Akatsuki members ventured deeper into the forest, their eyes scanning the area for any signs of Naruto's presence. But the forest was silent, too silent. The trees seemed to close in around him, and the shadows lengthened, as if they were being washed. "You sense it too, don't you, Sasori?" Deidara asked, his voice laced with amusement. "This place is different. It's like the earth itself is alive." Sasori didn't respond immediately. His eyes flicked around, studying the environment, aware of the danger that lurked in the unknown. "I don't like it. We need to be cautious." Suddenly, the air grew heavy, and before they could react, the ground beneath their feet shifted. A trap. They were caught. Deidara's explosive clay erupted in a violent burst of flame as he tried to escape, but the blast only served to reveal more of the twisted creations Naruto had left behind. The very earth seemed to ripple with dark energy, and the trees came alive, their roots twisting to form grotesque shapes. Naruto's creations, half human, half mechanical, emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. "I must admit, you are impressive," Sasori spoke, his voice devoid of emotion. He was studying the scene, observing the deadly efficiency of Naruto's traps. "But these creations, they are not true life. Mere puppets. Crude imitations." Naruto's figure emerged from the shadows, his eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "Your puppets are crude imitations of life. Mine surpass life itself." Sasori was unfazed by the insult, his mind racing. This boy, this monster, had the audacity to mock him. But Sasori's pride would not let him back down. "You think you've mastered something greater than life itself? I'll be the judge of that." Deidara's clay figures burst forth, their explosive power lighting up the night sky, but Naruto didn't flinch. His biomechanical creations moved with inhuman speed, dodging the attacks and closing the distance in seconds. They overwhelmed the clay creations, ripping them apart with vicious precision. Deidara's eyes widened in disbelief. "Impossible!" he shouted. "How can these things be so fast?" Naruto didn't answer. He was no longer just fighting for survival. He was demonstrating his superiority. His creations were beyond anything they had ever seen, his mind far sharper than Sasori's crude marionettes or Deidara's explosive art. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto directed his creations to close in on the two Akatsuki members. Sasori, ever the tactician, unsheathed his puppet, Hirako, preparing for battle. But Naruto was prepared for this. His eyes glowed with dark chakra as he raised his hand. The air seemed to ripple as his chakra expanded, encircling Sasori's puppet. Sasori's expression remained unchanged, but deep down, he could feel it, the pressure of Naruto's power, the force that threatened to crush him. He quickly activated his technique, releasing the countless blades from Hiriko's body in an attempt to strike Naruto down. But it was futile. The creations that Naruto controlled moved with unnatural precision, their bodies adapting to every attack. Sasori's puppets were torn apart piece by piece as Naruto watched with cold amusement. "Your creations are so predictable," Naruto taunted, his voice like ice. "They're slaves to their design. You lack the creativity to transcend your own limitations." Sasori's eyes narrowed. "You think yourself superior, don't you? You've got power, yes, but what you create is still nothing but a hollow shell. It's not real." Naruto's eyes gleamed with a cruel satisfaction. "Real?" he asked, his voice almost mocking. "What is real? Flesh and blood? You think your puppets are alive? They're tools, just like everything else. Only I have the power to make true creations. Mine are alive in a way you'll never understand." With a final wave of his hand, Naruto's biomechanical monstrosities overwhelmed Sasori's defenses, tearing through the puppet in an instant. Sasori, unable to react in time, was caught off guard as his lifeless puppet was ripped apart. "Your puppets are nothing," Naruto whispered as he stepped forward, his eyes glowing with dangerous intensity. "And you're next." Deidara's gaze shifted from Sasori's fallen form to Naruto. He had underestimated him. He thought he could control this situation, but the boy had proven too powerful. Still, Deidara was not one to back down easily. He would not be humiliated. "That's it, then," Deidara snarled, his eyes flashing with anger. "I'll show you my art." He created a massive clay dragon, launching it at Naruto with all the explosive force he could muster. But Naruto wasn't moved. He raised his hand and, with a single motion, his creations tore the dragon apart, its pieces falling to the ground like debris. "Your art is nothing more than destruction," Naruto said coldly. "My creations are art. They live, breathe, and think. You could never understand true creation." Naruto's creations closed in, overwhelming Deidara with terrifying speed and precision. He was no longer in control of the situation. His art was being consumed by Naruto's vision of perfection. The battle was over. Deidara and Sasori had been defeated, but Naruto's work had only just begun. As the two Akatsuki members lay at his mercy, Naruto began to formulate his next step. He could feel their chakra powerful, yet unrefined. They were powerful, but ultimately inferior to him. With a wave of his hand, Naruto began his process of transformation. The chakra of both Deidara and Sasori was drawn in, infused into his biomechanical creations. They writhed and twisted, their bodies becoming even more monstrous as the chakra enhanced them. Deidara and Sasori, now trapped within their own bodies, found themselves undergoing a transformation unlike any they had ever imagined. Their minds were clouded, their bodies reshaping into twisted versions of themselves more machine than human. The remnants of their former selves were still there, but now they were nothing more than puppets under Naruto's control. "I've made you more than you ever were," Naruto said coldly as the two men writhed in agony, their once pristine forms now grotesque mockeries of life. "And now, you will serve me." The two former Akatsuki members, now biomechanical monsters, were no longer the skilled fighters they once were. They had become part of Naruto's ever-growing army, tools to be used in his war for perfection. As the night grew darker, Naruto stood over their transformed bodies, his vision clearer than ever. The Akatsuki's hunt had failed. And now, Naruto was ready to take his place as the god of a new world, one built on his vision of perfection. The war against Naruto had reached its tipping point. After years of terror and devastation, the five great shinobi nations Konoha, Kumo, Iwa, Kiri, and Suna had finally come together in a last-ditch effort to stop the demon that had risen from the ashes of his village. But the Alliance of Nations had no illusions. They were not here to strategize a victory, they were here to prevent their annihilation. At the center of the strategy meetings, the cage gathered, their faces strained with exhaustion and hopelessness. Their villages had already been decimated by Naruto's monstrous creations, the Cage of the New Dawn. The artificial Jinchuriki, enhanced with Kurama's chakra, were impervious to traditional jutsu and had shown a terrifying adaptability to every technique the shinobi world had to offer. Naruto had already bent the world to his will, leaving behind a trail of wreckage, yet the cage still believed they could put an end to his madness. But Naruto, the puppet master, had other plans. In the ruins of Uzashiyagakure, Naruto stood overlooking his creations, his mind sharp, his focus unwavering. The world had never understood him, never accepted the potential he embodied. Konoha's oppression had fueled his transformation, and now, the world was paying the price. His rise was unstoppable, and now, he was on the verge of reshaping everything. His army, powered by Kurama's chakra and his grotesque biological experiments, had grown vast and diverse. These were no ordinary soldiers. These were living machines, combining the biology of shinobi with the power of the tailed beast. They were adaptable, evolving with every battle. The Cage of the New Dawn, the generals of his new world stood ready to wage war. Each one, a unique blend of man, chakra, and metal, bore the indelible mark of his brilliance. Naruto's eyes glowed with the same fiery intensity as the beast inside him. He could feel Kurama's power surging through his body, mingling with his own brilliant mind. This was not about revenge anymore. This was about domination. He would be the architect of a new world. His creations would reshape the fabric of existence, bending everything in his image. Naruto, Kurama's deep voice rumbled within him. The Shinobi Alliance is gathering. They may try to stop you, but do you truly believe they stand a chance against your power? Naruto's lips curled into a smile, his eyes glittering with cruel amusement. They're nothing but ants, Kurama. Their strength lies in their numbers, but they lack the creativity to defeat me. I will show them how fragile their world truly is. The five Kage were desperate. Their intelligence had failed them, their strategies crumbled under the weight of Naruto's advancing forces. But this time, they had something new, an untested weapon, a last hope. The Alliance had gathered an army like no other, a coalition of their finest forces, ready to engage Naruto head-on. The plan was simple: force Naruto's forces into a direct confrontation and engage him in battle. They had no illusion of defeating Naruto alone, but if they could weaken his army, perhaps they could strike at the heart of his power. As the first wave of the Alliance's forces stormed the ruined gates of Uzashiyagakure, they were met with an eerie silence. The war-torn landscape lay barren, with only the echoes of their footsteps and the distant howl of the wind. Yet the air was thick with tension, as if the very earth itself was watching, waiting. From the shadows, Naruto's creations emerged. The Cage of the New Dawn were no longer mere puppets. They had evolved. Their monstrous forms, once crude and ungainly, now moved with precision and elegance, their features refined, their strength amplified. Each one was a reflection of Naruto's vision, a living testament to his power. They moved in perfect synchrony, each one performing its task with biological efficiency. The first to fall was the Mizukage's forces. Despite their strength and cunning, they were no match for the precision of Naruto's creations. The Cage of the New Dawn adapted to the Mist's hidden techniques and countered them with brutal force. The Mist's secret jutsu were no longer secrets. Every movement, every strike, was predicted, countered, and neutralized. The Kumo shinobi fared no better. The lightning-fast techniques they prided themselves on were met with an impenetrable wall of defenses, the Cage's creations absorbing the strikes and retaliating with a force that shattered their ranks. Each clone, each puppet, had been tailored to counter every element, every style of combat. I told you this was inevitable, Naruto whispered to himself, his smile growing more sinister as his army decimated the Alliance's forces. But even in the face of overwhelming odds, the five Kage would not surrender. They fought with the strength of nations behind them, each one pushing themselves to their limits. They could feel the weight of the world pressing down on their shoulders, the last remnants of their villages fighting for survival. The Raikage, his muscles rippling with raw strength, charged forward, aiming to strike down one of Naruto's creations. He clashed with the Kage's generals, each one more powerful than the last. But even his mighty strength was met with resistance. The Kage's creations, enhanced by Kurama's chakra, were far beyond the limits of human power. "You cannot defeat me, Raikage," one of the Kage muttered as it parried his strikes. "Your strength is irrelevant in the face of true power." Raikage gritted his teeth. He had fought in countless wars, but this was different. This was something beyond comprehension. Meanwhile, the Tsuchikage engaged one of the Kage of the New Dawn in a battle of intellect. The two exchanged blows and jutsu, but the Kage's ability to adapt left the Tsuchikage struggling. It had anticipated every move he made. Every strategy, every maneuver, was countered with precision. "There is no room for your tactics here," the Kage of the New Dawn said, its voice low, mechanical. "I have evolved past your crude strategies. I am beyond your understanding." But it wasn't just the Kage of the New Dawn Naruto had to contend with. The 5 Kage themselves had proven formidable, refusing to back down despite the overwhelming odds. Together, they fought against the puppets, drawing on their collective will to protect the world they had built. Naruto, watching from the shadows, knew the fight was far from over. This would not be an easy victory. The Kage of the New Dawn, despite their power, were not invincible. But Naruto had no intention of letting this battle slip from his grasp. He had one final card to play. As the battle raged on, Naruto retreated to his inner sanctum. It was time to unleash the final phase of his plan. His ultimate creation, the true embodiment of his power. Naruto's hands glowed with raw chakra as he poured his essence into the final puppet, a creation that would leave his enemies in awe. This new puppet, unlike any before it, was not just a vessel for chakra. It was a fusion of all of his greatest experiments, an entity that surpassed even the original Kage of the New Dawn. This new puppet would be the key to ending the battle and establishing his dominance. It would be a living weapon, a god in its own right. And once it was complete, Naruto would unleash it upon the 5 Kage and their forces, and the shinobi world would fall to him. As the puppet's form solidified, Naruto's eyes gleamed with excitement. "This is the future," he whispered. "The world will bow to my creation, and all who resist will be obliterated." He released the puppet into the battlefield, and it tore through the fighting forces with an unstoppable fury, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. The final evolution of Naruto's vision had arrived. The alliance of 5 Kage had failed. Despite their bravery and resilience, Naruto's creations had proved too powerful, too adaptable. The Puppet Master's army had decimated their forces with brutal efficiency, and the 5 Kage had no choice but to retreat. As the world lay on the brink of collapse, Naruto stood amidst the ruins of his enemies, his smile wide, his heart filled with an unshakable sense of accomplishment. The Puppet Master had ascended, and the shinobi world would never be the same again. The sun had long set over the desolate landscape that was once Uzashiyagakuer. The air was thick with the remnants of destruction, a world turned cold by years of war and twisted by the darkness that had taken root in the heart of one man. Naruto, the Puppet Master, had reshaped his ancestors' homeland into a living fortress, a twisted monument to his genius. The ruins of Uzashiyagakuer were no longer just stones and crumbled walls. They had become part of his army, each brick, each fallen tower infused with chakra, crafted with precision, and reinforced with the dark power that now coursed through him. The walls self-regenerated, rising again as if they were part of his very will. The ground was littered with traps, chakra-infused sigils buried deep, waiting for the wrong step to trigger them into deadly action. Naruto's voice echoed through the silence of the ruined city. The world was his now, and everything in it, from the smallest bug to the mightiest warrior, was but a cog in the machine he had built. I have transcended, he muttered to himself, his eyes scanning the landscape. Hatred is beneath me now. My experiments, my creations, they will outlive all of us. The Shinobi Alliance was the last hope for the world. They had already endured so many battles, so much destruction. But Naruto's growing power was a threat that no one could ignore. The cage, once fractured by personal grudges and political tension, had united once again, this time under a common cause. Their collective will, the strength of their past experiences, had brought them here. Together, they would destroy Naruto or die trying. But it wasn't just the cage who had come to fight. Sasuke Uchiha, once a child of Konoha, had joined the ranks of the alliance. His hatred for Naruto, once a force that bound them together, now stood as a dark reminder of the twisted path Naruto had chosen. The boy who had once been his closest friend had become the very monster he had vowed to defeat. Sasuke's bitterness had shifted from the village that abandoned him to the man who had abandoned the bond they once shared. It was Sasuke who now led the charge, leading a small infiltration team of elite shinobi into the heart of Naruto's fortress. The battle was close. Every step they took was a fight against time and against the horrors that lay hidden in the ruined city. The self-regenerating walls, the traps, and the monstrous creations that Naruto had unleashed kept them on edge, but there was no turning back. Sasuke's eyes burned with determination as he looked over his team. His Sharingan was active, scanning for any hidden dangers as they navigated the maze-like structure of Naruto's defenses. His goal was clear: to face Naruto, to confront the man who had betrayed their shared hatred and ideals. "I'll make him understand," Sasuke muttered under his breath. "He'll regret abandoning everything we fought for." Naruto's fortress loomed before them like an immovable monolith. The walls were alive with the pulse of chakra, every inch of the fortress vibrating with Naruto's will. It was here, in this labyrinth of horrors, that Sasuke knew the final battle would take place. As Sasuke's team pushed forward, Naruto's voice echoed, cutting through the stillness. "Did you think you could defeat me, Sasuke?" Naruto's voice was calm, unsettling in its coldness. "You, who still cling to the past. You, who think hatred is the answer." Sasuke's hand tightened around the hilt of his sword, his eyes narrowing. "I'm here to stop you, Naruto. You've gone too far." A chuckle resonated from the shadows, and out of the darkness stepped Naruto, his presence overwhelming. His eyes glowed with a dangerous intensity, the chakras swirling around him like a storm. His body was an eerie blend of organic material and metal, the result of his countless experiments. But it was more than just his physical form that had changed. It was his mind. Naruto had transcended the limits of a mere human, and he had done so by abandoning everything that once made him a shinobi. "I've transcended, Sasuke," Naruto said, his voice cool, detached. "Hatred, anger, sorrow, they're all beneath me now. My creations will survive us all. They will outlive the shinobi world." Sasuke's eyes burned with intensity, but there was no anger in his gaze, only the cold determination of someone who had already sacrificed everything. "You've betrayed everything we fought for, Naruto. You may have power, but you've lost your humanity." Naruto's lips curled into a cold smile, one that sent a shiver down Sasuke's spine. "Humanity is irrelevant. I've evolved beyond a need for it. What you see before you, Sasuke, is the future. And there's no place for the past in it." Before Sasuke could react, the ground beneath them began to tremble, and from the shadows, a terrifying force emerged. Naruto's creations, his grotesque puppet army, emerged from every crack in the fortress, surrounding Sasuke and his team. Each of them was a twisted mockery of life, chakra-infused abominations that seemed to ride and twist with unnatural energy. "Your efforts are futile," Naruto said, as the army of monsters advanced. "These creatures are my legacy. This is the future." Sasuke's eyes flashed with anger, but he knew this was only the beginning. He had come prepared. The clash was violent, and the ground shook with each movement. Sasuke and his team engaged Naruto's creations with ferocity, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer numbers and the adaptability of the creatures. Every strike was countered, every jutsu countered with a perfect adaptation by Naruto's puppets. But Sasuke was not deterred. His Sharingan saw through the movements of Naruto's puppets, each one revealing its weaknesses. With each slash of his sword, each jutsu he unleashed, he cut through the creatures, buying time. And then, Naruto himself stepped forward, his eyes locking with Sasuke's. "I've been waiting for this, Sasuke," Naruto said, his voice calm but laced with an unsettling certainty. "I know you're the only one who could understand me. But in the end, you're nothing but a relic. A shadow of the past." Sasuke's eyes burned with a fierce intensity. "I'll stop you. I'm the only one who can." With that, the battle between Naruto and Sasuke erupted. The final confrontation was not just a clash of power but of ideals. Sasuke's sword clashed against Naruto's creations, while Naruto unleashed his full power, manipulating the very environment around him. The fortress itself seemed to fight against Sasuke, its walls shifting and twisting to imprison him. The cage, watching from afar, realized that Sasuke was fighting not just for his own survival but for the survival of the world. With each blow, Sasuke chipped away at Naruto's plans, slowly bringing the world's hope back into focus. But Naruto, for all his power, was relentless. He had transcended everything that once made him human, and in doing so, had become an unstoppable force. Yet even he could not escape the strength of his bonds, the strength of those who still cared about him, those who still sought to stop him. In a final, desperate act, Sasuke combined his power with the strength of the cage, sealing Naruto away using a technique that combined all their chakra. Naruto's body was sealed, his creations collapsing into lifeless husks around him. The shinobi world had won, but it was a hollow victory. The price of their success was high. Sasuke stood amidst the wreckage of Uzashigakure, looking down at the ruins of his former friend. Naruto, the puppet master, had fallen. But the shadow of his actions would loom over the world for years to come. Sasuke's gaze turned skyward. The future was uncertain, but for now, the world had been spared.